In this video, I'll introduce the basics of building up a model in Malloy and how you can use the composable pieces of that model to start querying. Now I'm in VS Code here, and I have a little bit of a stub model for us to start playing with and getting familiar with concepts. You'll notice on the left when I go to this Malloy section that I can see the schema. This includes all of the columns that are in the underlying table, as well as the names of any things that I've defined out in my query, and we'll cover this as we're going along. Up here, you can see that I've pointed to this table in my underlying BigQuery database, and I have named this Explorer of airports. So what that essentially does is it, first off, creates a source basically so that I can run queries with a from clause against this airports table. But more importantly, what that lets me do is start to refine and make more of that table or explore. So I've added a couple of metrics in here that are metrics that'll be executed at query time. I've also added in full-on queries that I can issue against that airports table. So for example, if I want to run a query that groups against the state column and takes account of the table, I can run this little code lens here, and this will give me a preview of what that looks like. So we can look at the rendered version, we can look at the JSON, or we can see the SQL that was actually generated by that query. Same thing applies for by facility type. So pretty straightforward for these simple queries that appear here. So now if I want to start creating more queries against this model or leveraging this model outside of it, what I'll do is I'll write query, and you'll notice here now this is external of this defined explorer that I've created. And I'm going to start with airports as my source. I'll write this arrow, which separates my source from the operation that I want to perform upon it. And in here, I can either write out the specific fields I want to see, or in this case, I can actually just reference the name of one of these named queries that I have, and I can run it against by state. I can run it against by facility type. Pretty simple. Now, if I want to make any modifications to that, for example, if I only wanted to return the top 10 states, I can do so by typing top or limit, interchangeable here, and that's going to start refining that query. And I can see that's generated a limit in the SQL underneath it. I can also add additional fields. So for example, if I wanted to see average elevation, I can tell it to aggregate by average elevation. And you'll notice that while in the model I'm defining a measure, in this query I'm telling it that that's the aggregate I want to reference, and the same rings true for these named queries. And that's just going to add average elevation into that existing definition of what by state means. So let's now create something rather than by refining an existing named query, let's create something totally new. So I'll set up these braces here again. Let's group by, from my list of fields here on the left, region. So if I click on that, it'll copy it to my clipboard. I'll copy an FA region, and let's aggregate this by airport count and run. So this is just a brand new query, really similar to referencing one of these named queries that exist here. Main difference being that it's completely on the fly and I don't need to necessarily build anything into the model unless I think that I will be reusing it. Now where things get a little bit more fun is when I can start composing with these different pieces that I'm starting to build up. So I will nest now this named query of by state just by name. And what this is going to do is it's going to break down for each of these regions the specific list of states that exists inside it and that airport count. So it's taken that by state query, but it's nested it up inside of what those regions are. And I can nest by as many things as I want. I can also nest by facility type here and run that. And we'll just see these tables start to build up adjacent to one another. Now, if I wanted to start refining these or doing anything with them, why don't we make maybe a bar chart of just the top 3 facility types in each state. So let's say by facility type bar chart is, and I've just given that a new name since I'm refining it, and that underscored bar chart is just a shortcut to have it generate a bar chart for us. We have a whole data styles layer that is the preferred way to do this, but this is a straightforward way to do something really quick. And I'm going to add a limit of 10 here, and we'll run that. And that limit is only, or I guess 10 is not what I was going to limit by. I was only going to limit by 3. And that is just going to now give us a bar chart here. And you'll notice this limit is exclusively applied to by facility type. It doesn't touch anything else in any of these queries. I can filter within these nested queries. I can add additional fields. Absolutely anything that you want to refine, you'll be able to do. So let's think now about some joining. Maybe I want to augment all that I've started exploring here with some information from my flights table. So in this case, what I want to do, I think I'm going to be using flights a lot, is I want to go ahead and model it. So I'm going to give it its own explore. Any source or table that you want to regularly be referencing, you're going to want to create an explore for. And we'll say flights. Gotta spell that one right. And if I refresh the schema up here, we should now be able to additionally see flights. But in order to use it within airports, I'm going to join that in. So I'm going to join, and these are my choices for join. I can join one, many, or cross. In this case, a single airport will appear many times in the flights table. So join many. I'm going to tell it, and I'm going to call that flights rather than flight. Join flights. And then I'll declare what that relationship is. So let's use the origin. I could also tie this to the destination column in flights, since it's the same table join multiple times, equals. And if I look at airports, that key there is code. Code. Excellent. And now, refresh the schema view one more time, I'll see that flights is actually essentially nested now, so that all of the flights associated with a given origin are now available within that structure. So what this will let me start to do is, if I want to, let's for example add the number of flights over here. I can say aggregate, and I want to do flight count. And in this case, I'm just going to create this field on the fly. I could also add it to the flights table as a measure, and that'd be accessible, and say flights.count. And now I can run that. And it's going to take care of making all these things unique for me. So if it needs to take any distincts or anything like that, it'll handle it. The other thing I should point out as I go into this SQL here is that this is all a single pass. So even though I have these multiple nested queries and everything, it's turning this into a single pass of our BigQuery data set, which is really efficient and great. Now, these nests can actually be nested as deeply as we would like. So for example, if inside of by state, I would like to further nest, let's say, the top 5 carriers in each of those states, I'll alias this and say by state with carrier is by state. I'll refine that and add by carrier is, and I'll group by flights.carrier, and let's aggregate that by this same flight count that we've been using. That's probably something at this point that we'd want to think about adding to our flights definition. And let's just get the top 5 and run that. So this just keeps building on itself, and we can nest this as far down as we would like to nest it, which becomes really powerful and really dense information very quickly. One final concept to leave with here today, I'll just briefly cover filtering. So if you can filter anywhere, the keyword for this is where. And for example, if we only wanted to see a certain carrier, maybe let's do, I believe that's Delta. So let's say where flights dot carrier equals DL. And maybe it doesn't make sense to have this by carrier breakdown, so we can go ahead and delete that from this example just to make it a little simpler. Now, when I go and run this, we should see this where clause fall everywhere. And you can apply filters inside of one of these nests. So I could just show, by state for the specific bar charts. You can apply it to the source. If you start to stack multiple queries using these pipelines, you can do it at any stage. And we can see how that manifests in the where clause here, just where carrier equals Delta. That's the basics I wanted to introduce today. If you want to keep playing with this flights data set, we have a sample model. If you click on download sample models here, you can go and get all of our sample models, or they're also just available through our documentation site. And that can be a really great way for you to get to know Malloy and also start playing with your own data. Thanks.